Hey, I'm golf broadcaster Matt Adams. The updated and expanded second edition of my book, The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments, is now available. Readers can expect to march with Arnie's Army at the 1960 U.S. Open, relive Jack Nicklaus's remarkable 1986 Masters win, and be amazed by the Tiger Slam. The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments. Pick it up where fine books sold, including BarnesandNoble.com and Amazon.com.
Thrive Suite Productions. And welcome to another edition of This Day in Sports History. It's February 6th, and on this day in 1958, a plane carrying the Manchester United Football Club crashed in Munich, Germany, claiming the lives of 23 people. This Manchester United team was known as Busby's Babes. Manager Matt Busby believed success was more likely with youthful players. He wanted fresher legs and minds that could still be molded in his image. He banked on youth being the key to Manchester United's fruitful future. Busby used the Manchester United Junior Athletic Club to sow the seeds of success, and the youth movement worked, taking a club that had been relegated to lower divisions in the 1930s and was nearly bankrupt to the highest levels of football in Europe. Busby's Babes won an FA Cup in 1948 and won a league crown in 1952. Now atop English football, Busby wanted to dominate all of Europe and in 1957 took his club to the semifinals before losing. Now here on February 6, 1958, Busby's team had just played a match in Yugoslavia, which is now Serbia, against Red Star Belgrade. The plane they were in to fly back to England was not capable of a non-stop flight of that distance, and so stopped in Munich to refuel. There were 44 people on the plane, consisting of players, team staff, journalists, photographers, and the flight crew. The plane was an airspeed ambassador, being flown by experienced former RAF pilots. After taking on fuel, the plane attempted to take off, but the pilot noticed an issue with one of the engines and aborted the takeoff and returned to the hangar. He mentioned that the engine was making a strange noise and a pressure gauge fluctuated. A quick adjustment was made and a second attempt to take off happened 3 minutes later. This attempt was also aborted, and once again the plane returned to the hangar. The team deboarded and went to the terminal while the engines were looked at. It started to snow, too, and there were thoughts that the trip back home would be delayed until the following day. In fact, that was the suggestion of one of the Munich mechanics to keep the plane for the night and tune the engines. But the pilot was anxious to stay on schedule and figured just a different taxiing tactic was all that was needed. A slower speed initially, then a slower increase in the throttle on a long runway will give him the time to build up the speed necessary to take off. 15 minutes after the team had gotten off the plane, they were called back. The plane lined up on the runway and accelerated slowly. Once it reached 134 miles per hour, it passed the point of no return, and takeoff could not be aborted. But 134 was not fast enough to get it airborne. But as the pilots gave it more throttle, the speed dropped to 120 miles per hour instead of increasing. They could not achieve lift, and it was too late to stop it. The plane skidded off the runway, crashed through a fence, hitting a house, a tree, and a barn full of tires and a fuel truck, causing a fire to erupt. 20 people died at the scene, including 8 players, 3 staff members, and 8 journalists, along with one of the flight crew. 1 person died in the ambulance on the way to the hospital, and 2 others died days later due to their injuries. The crash was initially blamed on pilot error, but after an investigation, slush on the end of the runway caused the plane to slow unexpectedly, preventing takeoff. 2 players who survived the crash were so badly injured they never played football again. 2 of the survivors that day were Busby and Bobby Charlton, while keeping the memory of those who died that day alive by recounting their stories. They helped rebuild a club that had been decimated by the Munich air disaster. It took another decade, but Manchester United was able to lift the European Cup in 1968 after a 4-1 win over Benfica, with Charlton scoring twice. And while the team celebrated the victory, Charlton remembered those who were lost on this day in 1958. That's all for today. More tomorrow on This Day in Sports History.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website, seriously, all you got to do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you got to do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.